Welcome to Office Hours with Bill Jennings at Klamath Community College, Distance Learning. So we've started off our video series talking about identifying quadratic equations. Now let's work on solving one. And the first step we're going to, or the first style we're going to solve are ones where factoring is just going to be the easiest way. And we need to be able to identify those styles for us. And first off, remember, we have to be able to identify that we're working with a quadratic equation so we can use those techniques. If we see something of the form of 5x plus 2 equals 12, it's a linear equation. We use those linear techniques that we knew from the past where we isolate the x variable or the unknown variable to one side and the constants to the other side of the equation. That was our strategy for linear equations. That all goes out the window when we have quadratic equations. Quadratic equations, our number one strategy is going to be setting it equal to 0, unless it's of a very special form coming up in the next video. But if we have it set equal to 0, then we try and factor it and use that zero product principle to our edge. So again, what we're focusing on right now is this factoring method. Now, factoring method works very well if I can give us an equation and I can set it equal to 0, or maybe it's already set equal to 0 for me, and then if it's factorable, I'm going to factor it. The next step will be using that zero product principle. Now, the zero product principle is simply this. If I have A times B, and I know that I have something that's an unknown, and I times it by another unknown, and it produces a product of 0, the only way in the world that's going to come about is if either the A is the 0 or the B is the 0. One of those is the 0. If I told you I had something times 5 equals 0, whatever goes there, the result of that garbage in the middle, has to be 0, because 5 times what would make a 0? That's got to be a 0. That's how our zero product principle works. And if I can put something in factored form, factoring means I've put it in the form of something times another something makes the 0. Once I know that, I use the zero product principle to take each of these results and say, well then either A is the 0 or B is the 0. One of those has got to be the bad guy. Then we solve the resulting equations, which in these cases for quadratics will always be linear, and we're just going to use our basic linear techniques to finish the problem up. And then we should always check our answer. Sometimes that means using the back of the book if I want to be progressively quick and move on, but always check your answer before you move on so you know you're doing the problem right, so you're practicing correctly. Now, sometimes you can check your answer, by plugging the number back in, and that's always a good skill to have. If you have an answer available to you, so you can move on quickly, checking the back of the book is very good also. So let's use this. Let's put it to work and see what we get. So let's cross these out so we can progress as we go. So I've been given this x squared plus 8x equals 0. Now the idea and the strategy here is that I factor if possible. So set equal to 0 and factor. Now it's very nice that this is an equation that is factorable. This or a polynomial, if you will, or trinomial, this x squared plus 8x plus 7 is factorable, and that's why it works. I can factor that very quickly to be x plus 7, x plus 1. Now I've given myself a nice cream puff to shoot at on the first one, but that's okay. We can be successful with that. So I have x plus 1 and x plus 7 are set equal to 0. That's that same thing as thinking of this as being my A and this as being my B. And so as that zero product principle says, take the first one times the second one. One of those has got to be the bad guy, or the 0 in this case. X plus 7 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. And with that being said, I can use my linear techniques to finish this and say x equals -7 and x equals -1. So I end up with a solution for this problem that is -7, -1. And I can check my answer by plugging it in, or I could use the back of the book if it was available to me so I can move on quickly. Now, the next question right here looks at, well, the first question I might have is that a quadratic equation? Well, no matter what I've got here, I'm going to need to distribute this out and get rid of those parentheses so I can see what I really have. Well, when I distribute that out, I land at 8x squared plus 18x equals 5. Get that 5 going on there. Now, is that a quadratic equation? Yes, it is, because I have that x squared. Factoring quadratic equations, remember, are different than those old linear equations that we were doing. The old linear equations said get all the x's on one side, get the numbers on the other. This is not a linear equation, it's quadratic. Strategy number 1, set it equal to 0, hope for the best, hope it factors. So let's set it equal to 0. 8x squared plus 18x minus 5 equals 0. Okay. Let's hope it factors. Now, the factoring techniques, if we can't factor it, it's not going to work. So if I'm asking you to do it by factoring, we're probably going to come out okay. The problem's going to work best for us if it factors. If I ask you to factor it, most likely we're going to be in that case. So let's see if we can use our factoring strategies and techniques to be successful here. I believe there's going to be a 4x and a 2x going on here, and I'm going to need that plus 5 over here and a minus 1 to make that happen. A quick mental check inside of my head, my middle term works out, everything looks like it's in place. Again, this is a times b equals 0. That means my a, 4x minus 1, is my 0, or 2x plus 5 is my 0. Well, with that in mind, let's see if we can finish the problem using my linear techniques. This is going to mean that x equals a quarter, and this over here is going to mean that x equals a negative 5 halves, and we should be off and running. Again, I should write my solution here as a negative 5 halves and a quarter, and there's my solution to that problem. Again, quadratic equation. Now, my third example here, sometimes we make the easiest problems the hardest. Let's look at this problem, and I'll set it up for you, and I think you're going to find that when you're practicing, potentially this might be one that sneaks up and grabs you a little bit. First off, it's a quadratic equation because I've got 5x squared equals 20x, and that 5x squared telling me, hey, it's got a square in it, so we do have a quadratic equation. My strategy says set the equation equal to 0, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. 5x squared minus 20x equals 0. Now, part number 2 says factor. Now, sometimes, like I said, don't make the easy problem the hard one. I think sometimes we get used to factoring and we think it's got to have 3 terms in it for it to be a trinomial so we can use our techniques. Strategy number 1 for factoring is greatest common factor. And don't make this problem hard. It's a 5x squared minus 20x. There's simply a 5x in common, leaving me with x minus 4 equals to 0. That is how that would factor. Don't let this one fool you into causing you trouble. Now, is this in a factored state? And the answer to that question is yes. I've got a 5x and I've got an x minus 4. So that means looking at them individually, that means that 5x equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. With that being said, this will produce x equals 0 and this will produce an x equals 4. So at the end of the day, I end up with a solution of 0 and 4. It's okay that 0 is a solution. That's one of those things. Quadratic equations are always going to give us 2 answers. There's a unique case that comes about in some instances where we get the same answer twice. We can also, we'll learn in a minute, we're going to get some imaginary answers, but you'll always get 2 answers. So always be on the lookout for that. If you only have 1 answer, make sure you got the same answer twice. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.